Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to Newstos. So, it's been a little while since we've really gotten some new information about Zelda Breath of the Wild 2. This is very possibly the most anticipated game coming out for the Nintendo Switch, but as of yet, we don't really have much information about this game, to the point we don't even actually know its official name yet. However, we now have gotten some new details about this game and some of the gameplay mechanics thanks to some different patents that have made their way online, and I think this is actually quite telling on what this game will quite possibly be. Definitely some exciting stuff there, but then also it does appear that Xbox Game Pass is actually helping the overall game industry grow right now, contrary to what some fans might want to believe. This is one of those things where there are certain fans out there that have been quote-unquote concerned about subscription services such as Xbox Game Pass, but once again, it does look like Xbox Game Pass has been a very good thing for the game industry, so we will go over that one as well. To get things started off today, though, we are going to be talking about some Japan sales numbers, as the split over there right now is absolutely insane. It's actually been like this in the last couple weeks, which we'll kind of get into here in just a moment, but the Nintendo Switch is absolutely dominating Japan right now. And oh no, I'm not just throwing the word domination out there for no reason at all. This, in every sense of the word, is absolute domination. You can actually take a look at this graph, and you can see here, made by Famitsu Cells, through December 6th to December 12th, the Nintendo Switch has 98.6% of the market with 192,335 units sold. Meanwhile, the PlayStation 5 has sold 1,133 units, and the Xbox Series has sold 805 units. That is one of the most absurd splits that I have ever seen following the game industry. But there's actually a reason for this, and it's a little disappointing, I understand that, but what's happening here is that it does seem like PlayStation and Xbox has abandoned Japan this holiday as they focus on more competitive markets. In places like the United States, where PlayStation and Xbox is really battling to have the most market share, that's where they're putting their stock into. You have to keep in mind that both the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series are incredibly high in demand across the entire world, and quite frankly, they just don't have enough stock to keep up with that type of demand, especially during the holiday. So right now, it does appear that they are going to kind of put all their stock into other regions and really battle it out for that market share in places such as the United States. I know that's disappointing, and I do feel like that they could have at least pushed out like 5,000, 10,000 units over in Japan. I think that that would have been a little bit better than just kind of completely abandoning them, but that seems to be the reality of the situation right now. Next up, we do have an interesting story. In a sense, you don't really ever hear something like this, but apparently Final Fantasy XIV is so popular right now that Square Enix actually had to make a tough decision to suspend all Final Fantasy XIV sales to alleviate some of the server congestion. Now, that is the important part here, because Final Fantasy XIV does rely on server capacity, and because Final Fantasy XIV is so popular with the launch of that new Endwalker expansion, it is absolutely overloaded the server to the point that 4,000 to 8,000 people have been queued to just enter the server. And I guess it's just gotten so bad to the point that they did have to suspend sales of this game. I guess that's kind of a good problem to have, because, I mean, clearly people are interested in your game and the new expansion with Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker. I mean, MMOs are well known to be big moneymakers for years and years, and with that much interest in your game, yeah, that's a good problem to have, I suppose, though it might not feel that way, at least short term. I mean, on one side, you're happy to see success for a game that you like, and this will ensure that this game gets even more support for the long-term future, but at the same time, I mean, you just want to play the game, and you just cannot do that right now. So I'm sure this is going to be very bittersweet for Final Fantasy XIV fans, especially those wanting to jump into that new Endwalker expansion. This is something that we are starting to see, though, with Final Fantasy XIV. With the downfall of World of Warcraft earlier this year, a large portion of that fan base has migrated over to Final Fantasy XIV, and its popularity has just absolutely skyrocketed. Like I said, I think this is a good problem to have as long as they can get more server capacity, but they're going to have to get this fixed, because a lot of people paid to play this game, and right now they just cannot do that. So hopefully we can see them get this fixed sooner rather than later. Let's go ahead and talk about Xbox Game Pass, though, because I feel like there's just this constant discussion on whether or not Xbox Game Pass helps or hurts the game industry. Now, there's one side of the community that really pushes for Xbox Game Pass, and then there's this other side that is very questionable about every little move that they make. So because of that, there's always this constant question, does it hurt games or does it help games? And I feel like we've talked about this a few different times on the channel by this point, but we are going to talk about it again today because Matt Piscatella, an industry analyst and an executive director at the NPD Game Group, he had some very interesting things to say about Xbox Game Pass. Yeah, let's just go over here and check out what he had to say. Data still suggests that subscription services like Game Pass are helping grow the overall market. Consumer response to games on these services appear to be amplified, which can help boost traditional purchasing of participating games across all platforms they appear on. Potential downside is if a game is poorly received on the service, that sentiment also appears to be amplified, which can weigh sales down. Overall, though, these services appear to be a net positive and can be a valuable part of a successful go-to-market strategy. Traditional purchasing isn't going anywhere, and it's totally fine as an individual consumer to not want to subscribe to a service. You do you. And I do completely agree with him here. If you just want to purchase games, you absolutely can do that. I am subscribed to Xbox Game Pass, but at the same time, I still purchase a lot of games. And one reason for that is because, quite frankly, I do save a lot of money by using Xbox Game Pass. They put a lot of games into that service day one that I get to play, and because I'm not spending that money to play those games, I have more money to spend on other games. But something that he does say here that is highly interesting is that it helps games on all platforms, not just Xbox. He does very specifically say that, and this is something that I have mentioned in the past. Some people kind of forget just how strong word of mouth can be. Word of mouth is one of the most powerful marketing tools, and that is exactly what Xbox Game Pass allows. All of these games that comes in Xbox Game Pass, especially the day one games, if you notice, a lot of people suddenly start talking about those games. And if they are good, people are going to talk about those games well after the release. By lowering this barrier to entry and having millions upon millions of people be able to play your game day one is huge, especially when your game is good, because then all of a sudden you're going to see these games be plastered all over social media. YouTubers are going to talk about them. Fans are going to be talking about them. People on Twitter, Instagram, wherever. A lot of people are going to be talking about that game because it's good and there's millions of people playing it because it's on Xbox Game Pass. And again, this doesn't just affect Xbox fans, but PlayStation fans see that, Nintendo fans see that, people on PC sees that. And if they are hearing that these games are good, there's a good chance that they too will buy these games as well, and that's kind of what this tweet shows. However, though, one of the good things about the Xbox ecosystem in general is that it allows for you to make the choice on whether or not you want to be subscribed to Xbox Game Pass. If you just want to purchase these games, you absolutely can do that, and we did see that this last month with Forza Horizon 5, even though this game launched directly into Xbox Game Pass. As he's pointed out, it was still, despite it being a day one Xbox Game Pass game, it was the fourth best selling game over in the United States for the entire month. That is absolutely incredible, and it's to the point that Forza Horizon 5 is actually the best launch month in terms of sales numbers ever for the Forza franchise, both with Horizon as well as Forza Motorsports. Absolutely incredible. But truthfully, I don't think that any of this is surprising. We've been hearing this for a couple of years now. Xbox has come out to talk about the statistics of Xbox Game Pass several times, and based off the data that they've given, Xbox Game Pass subscribers do buy more games. So I don't think that this is necessarily overly surprising, but this just once again proves a lot of the doubters wrong. Xbox Game Pass is helping the industry, it's not hurting it. Moving on, we did get some new details about Zelda Breath of the Wild 2, and this is some really exciting stuff. I know that a lot of people out there are extremely excited for this game, and even though we still have not gotten a new trailer for this game or even a new name for this game, we did, however, get some new details thanks to some patents that have made their way online. Now, all three of these are gameplay mechanics, one being more dynamic poses for archery and flying. And this one right here is interesting because we did actually see Link kind of flying through the sky in that last trailer that they showed us. And what this tells me is that this is an actual gameplay mechanic. And based off that pose that they did in that trailer, it actually looks very similar to something that you would see in Skyward Sword. Now, I find that really interesting because if you take a look at this other patent here, you also have the ability to go through a suspended platform freely. This, again, is something that we did see in that last trailer, so this, once again, looks like a real gameplay mechanic. And when I hear things like this, the very first thing that I start to think about is the verticality of this game. If you kind of look at that last trailer, something that you're going to notice quite a bit is that Link is above the clouds. There's a lot of different islands located in the clouds, and does any of this sound familiar at all? I mean, all of this kind of sounds a little similar to something like Zelda's Skyward Sword, which was located in the clouds. I mean, of course, you could go to the surface and everything, but the world itself was located in the clouds. So with these patents here showing that they are adding gameplay elements that does add to the verticality, it does have me wondering if maybe we're going to reach that Skyland again. And for that matter, if you think about it, could there possibly be a reason that maybe Nintendo re-released Skyward Sword just this year? I mean, I'm not saying that there absolutely is, but it does seem like there could possibly be a connection here with Skyward Sword and then Zelda Breath of the Wild 2. Regardless, though, this other gameplay mechanic is really interesting as well, though, because this next one here shows you rewinding time. Now, in the Zelda franchise, there's been a lot of times where you can manipulate time, but it does seem like this one is a little bit more self-controlled. And I think this one, alongside the one where you can go through the floor or walls, I think that these could make for some really interesting and clever puzzles. And this is something that personally really excites me. Now, I know that Zelda Breath of the Wild was an incredibly popular game and people absolutely loved it. It had this great world to explore and everything, but I felt the one thing that was really lacking in this game is its puzzles and dungeons. It just wasn't your traditional Zelda game, and what I would really like to see them be able to do in this sequel is to kind of add that element in as well. Sure, have this big open world and everything to explore, but I would like to see them amp up the puzzles a little bit more here with the sequel. And with having gameplay mechanics like this, I think there's a lot of potential to really do that. Of course, we'll kind of have to wait and see and everything. I do kind of worry that Zelda Breath of the Wild was just so popular. I mean, it's the best-selling Zelda game of all time, that they just won't go back to that original formula going forward. But I hope that's not the case. I hope they don't get too comfortable, and I hope that they kind of mesh the two together. That's my one thing that I would really like to see with this game. But nonetheless, I do think that there's some really interesting features here, and if you are looking forward to Zelda Breath of the Wild 2, yeah, it sounds like they have some unique ideas for this Zelda Breath of the Wild sequel, and it will be really interesting to see how they use these gameplay mechanics. If you do have any ideas on how they can use these gameplay mechanics, though, let me know in the comments below. Let's go and take a look at the poll of the day, though. Of course, yesterday they did show that Nintendo Indie World, so as usual, I wanted to ask you all, what letter grade would you give the Nintendo Indie World for December 15th of 2021? And as you can see here, 6% of you gave it an A, 14% of you gave it a B, 44% of you gave it a C, 14% a D, and then 22% an F. Yeah, I feel like an F is way too harsh for an event like this, but it does seem like the majority of you all feel it deserves just an overall average grade of a C. And okay, that's fair enough, because I don't necessarily know if there was that just one blow you away game from a very well-known IP. I know that there's a lot of people just really hoping for Hollow Knight Silksong by this point, and, you know, event after event, it doesn't make it there. But even then, I still felt like this was a really good event. There were several interesting games here that was revealed that I'm pretty confident will be well received next year, starting off with Sea of Stars. Sea of Stars is a game that's coming from the same creators that worked on The Messenger, and this game is heavily inspired by Chrono Trigger. That is quite the combination, and I think that this is going to probably build up a lot of hype as we head into its release next year. Now then, there's also a couple games that we kind of already know are really good because these games released on PC before, being Omori and then Grime. Both of these games were very well received from critics and fans alike over on PC, so I think once these games release on the Nintendo Switch, that's going to be magnified even further. And then, of course, we have to talk about River City Girls too, because, I mean, we all know that that first game was just fantastic, and if you like that one, they did give more details about River City Girls 2 here at that Nintendo Indie World. So I do feel like that they showed a lot of really good games here, and I think that that will definitely show next year as these games do release. I think when people start to play these games next year and they realize how good they are, I think a lot more people will kind of look back on this event and think, yeah, well, there was actually some really good games at that Nintendo Indie World. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget to bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.